It is with great pleasure that I welcome such an esteemed gathering of guests from Africa, the Caribbean, and the diaspora to the Bahamas. Our nations and people have much shared heritage, and the spirit of connection between the wider Caribbean and African regions have never been closer than they are today. The Bahamas has been provided with an excellent opportunity to host the 31st Afreximbank Annual Meeting and the 3rd Trade and Investment Forum, which provides an opportunity to engage in critical discussions around the theme, Owning Our Destiny, Economic Prosperity on the Platform of Global Africa. The inaugural Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum was held by Afreximbank in Bridgetown, Barbados in 2022 under the theme, One People, One Destiny, Uniting and Reimagining Our Future. That event captured the imagination of participants and gave impetus to the 2nd Trade and Investment Forum, which took place in Guyana last year under the theme, Creating a Shared Prosperous Future. The current iteration taking place here in the Bahamas builds on those previous events. The Afreximbank is to be commended for the critical role it is playing in strengthening the connections and relationships between the Caribbean and the African region by hosting these fora in the Caribbean. We are assembled here because we share the sentiment that economic growth and development between African nations and Caribbean nations can only be good for all parties. Our cultural ties and similarities must be the bridge to cooperating and collaborating so that we can attain our common ambitions and break free from the traditional labels of third world developing nations and develop a common path to sustained, balanced, and equitable economic growth. The more events such as this that our respective regions organize, the stronger we will become collectively. Economic cooperation and integration between the African and Caribbean regions are pivotal for leveraging collective strengths and overcoming individual limitations of economies. The Caribbean community, CARICOM, has long recognized the benefits of regional integration, which include building resilience, scaling economies, and enhancing global bargaining power.
While Africa has witnessed significant progress in recent years, we have often suffered cycles that have challenged us and sometimes fueled a certain Afro-pessimism and undermined our resolve. Many have pointed to the inherent biases in the global economic order as obstacles to our efforts. However, reforming the global economic architecture is deeply linked to us taking control of our destiny. This requires us to harness the spirit of unity and collaboration to ensure that our economic progress is driven by our aspirations and not merely as an incidental outcome of the economic goals of others. These sentiments take us back to the historic 1900 Pan-African Conference and the 1919 Pan-African Congress that sought to lay the groundwork for economic collaboration and the tireless efforts of pioneers such as Marcus Garvey, who, among other efforts, established the Black Star shipping line to transport goods and passengers between and among the global African economy, and Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president, with his admirable dedication to Pan-Africanism. The enduring ties among us compel us to build bridges of commerce and investment, and a major pillar of this bridge is the annual African-Caribbean Trade Investment Forum. This forum, promoted by the Afreximbank, seeks to strengthen the ties between the private sector of our two regions to advance trade, investment, and economic transformation. We are happy and fortunate to have this year's forum as part of the annual meetings program this week. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am also pleased to report that our bank has continued to show resilience. Through diligent execution of our strategic plan, we have been able to produce commendable financial results, the details of which will be presented to us by President Urama. It is notable, however, to point out that the bank's net income rose to $756.1 million in 2023 from $455.3 million in the previous year, bolstered by $349.8 million in new equity contributions as shareholders supported the general capital increase program. On behalf of the Afreximbank, I extend my deepest appreciation to our shareholders for their support and capital investments.
Honorable Prime Ministers, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you can now understand why we are overwhelmed with joy as we welcome you and your another esteemed guests and partners to the 31st annual meetings of Afreximbank and the 3rd annual Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. Afreximbank extends its profound appreciation to Honorable Prime Minister Philip Davis, his government, and indeed the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for graciously hosting this historic event. We are most grateful for the cordial and uniquely warm African reception received since our arrival here in Nassau. We also extend our appreciation to the heads of state and governments and their representatives, heads of international, continental, and regional institutions, corporate leaders, and all our esteemed partners who made sacrifices to join us here. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we realize that the fate of all Africans, irrespective of their geographic location, race, or color, is inextricably linked. In today's world where might is right, the weak can only find strength in unity. The over 2 billion Africans spread around the world must now recognize that together they constitute a powerful economic force that cannot be ignored anymore. They must also recognize that power can only be potent and credible if delivered on a common and cohesive platform. Since 2022, we have made progress towards creating that common platform. Following my visit to Barbados in September 2021 and the launch of the annual Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum in 2022, we have recorded remarkable achievements. 11 of the 15 member states of the CARICOM have joined our Afreximbank family. They all signed the partnership treaty that effectively conveys the same rights and privileges to Afreximbank as accorded to the bank by African countries under the Afreximbank Establishment Agreement. In 2023, Afreximbank opened its Caribbean regional office in Bridgetown, Barbados, which immediately commenced operations. The regional chief operating officer, Mr. Hedrika, is here with us. In less than 2 years, we've built a pipeline of transactions amounting to about $2.5 billion across the CARICOM. Transactions executed or under processing include a climate adaptation facility that is helping to rebuild schools damaged by severe adverse weather in St. Lucia, a trade finance line of credit to a bank that is expanding access to trade services in St. Kitts, a sports complex rehabilitation in Barbados that we hope will foster the expansion of sports and entertainment collaboration between Africa and the Caribbean, a project preparation facility that will support the emergence of a permanent trade exhibition facility in the Bahamas, a term loan to Guyana that is expected to accelerate critical infrastructure development in support of that rapidly expanding economy, a major oil-linked deal that will help realize Suriname's oil production ambitions, and a term loan in support of investments by Orascom Group, Egypt, in a tourism facility in Grenada, and many more. African direct investment opportunities under implementation and discussion amount to about $1.5 billion, including tourism projects in Guyana and Grenada, post-infrastructure projects in Barbados and Guyana, commercial fishery across 4 CARICOM states, investments in intra-island ferry services, as well as banking in the Bahamas, Barbados, and Guyana, to name but a few. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you can now see that we are reinventing a new middle passage, where goods and services and not humans are the stock in trade. And that is why we are very pleased to have been selected by the Association of CARICOM Central Banks to pilot the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System in this region. We look forward to a successful conclusion of that pilot so that working with the central banks, we can extend the power of PAPs to the CARICOM and make it a fulcrum for lifting CARICOM Africa trade. We will then consider extending the $3 billion settlement fund available for Africa to the CARICOM. In that way, intra-CARICOM trade and Africa-CARICOM trade will be paid for in the national currencies of Africa and the CARICOM states, thereby significantly reducing transaction costs. We are also very pleased to be moving beyond trade to people, emotions, and dreams. Afreximbank has extended the Creative Africa Nexus, the CANEX program, to the CARICOM region. We have taken CARICOM designers to Portugal Fashion Week and Paris Fashion Week, exposing them to global brands. Celebrity chef Natasha DeBorg from Trinidad and Tobago was featured at the 2023 CANEX at Inter-African Trade Fair 2023 in Cairo. And those of you who will be attending Afrexim Fest tomorrow night will listen and dance to pulsating music from a new album, One Drum, a project of a unique Afro-Caribbean collaboration under the auspices of Afreximbank's CANEX program. The album features great global African musicians, such as Afro-Caribbean musicians such as Olodu of Brazil, Stephen Marley of Jamaica, Flavor of Nigeria, Scorpion Kings of South Africa, Mohammed Ramadan from Egypt, and Sophia from Kenya. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is clear to us that it is people and not goods that will make the difference in this rediscovery journey we have embarked upon. That is why we have so far hosted 3 Caribbean and 4 Brazilian interns and given them opportunities to tour Africa. We are considering expanding the opening for Caribbeans from 4 to about 8 from this year. We will also welcome a partnership to send African interns to CARICOM governments and businesses under the broader Afreximbank internship program. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we made the foray into the Caribbean, we did not lose our focus on continental Africa, the origin of all Africans and indeed humankind. The past year was a phenomenal year for the bank and its work across Africa. Despite lingering macroeconomic challenges, the bank disbursed an amount of $18 billion, up by 8.7% from the previous year's $16.6 billion. These brought total assets and guarantees to an amount of $37.3 billion at the end of 2023. Just as we grew our assets, we also grew value for shareholders. Total revenues of our Afreximbank Group rose by 74.2% to reach $2.6 billion, with profits rising by 66% to $756 million. Group entities, including the Fund for Export Development in Africa and Afreximbank, started making modest contributions to revenue and profit. Beyond these figures, Your Excellencies, Beyond these figures, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are much more excited about the lives touched and the positive changes the bank made during the year. And because there were many, permit me to highlight just a few. We are proud to have been able to provide additional crucial support which enabled the giant projects being undertaken by Dangote Refining and Petrochemical Company to commence operations this year. That additional facility brought our direct and indirect support to the complex over the years to $2.6 billion, which has helped birth 3 monumental projects for Africa and indeed all Africans all over the world. The projects that have been supported and which have emerged from this support include the largest single-train oil refinery in the world, with processing capacity of over 650,000 barrels per day of crude oil. Again, one of the largest nitrogen fertilizer plants, producing 3 million tons of urea fertilizer per year, to soon rise to 6 million tons. And a petrochemical plant, which will produce about 1 million tons of polypropylene a year. We are proud to be associated with that transformational project and highlight it to demonstrate the value and critical role of the capital we own and control in financing our development. And in order to tackle Africa's energy crisis long-term and in the context of the emerging climate challenges, Afreximbank went into a partnership with members of the African Petroleum Producers Organization to create the Africa Energy Bank, to be capitalized at $5 billion. The treaty establishing the Energy Bank was opened for signature on June 3, 2024, just a few days ago. Afreximbank is the co-investor in that Energy Bank, which once operational later this year will focus on helping African Petroleum Producer Organization member countries to transition in an orderly manner to greener sources of energy, while ensuring that they continue to use their oil and gas resources to support their immediate developmental needs. We also continue our support towards Africa's industrialization through our collaborations with ARISE Integrated Industrial Platform. In 2023, the bank approved a $1 billion facility for ARISE to support the development of industrial parks and special economic zones across Africa, including in Cote d'Ivoire, Malawi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, Kenya, Nigeria, and elsewhere. This facility came on the full repayment of an aggregate of about $1 billion granted to ARISE and used to finance the development of special economic zones in Gabon, Benin, Togo, Chad, and Rwanda. ARISE is also the implementing entity under the $3 billion Special Agro-Processing Zone Initiative the African Development Bank is championing with Afreximbank, the Africa Finance Corporation, and other institutions. We thank ARISE and the AFC for our impactful partnership in pursuit of Africa's industrial development. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, 2023 was a year some of our initiatives also began to be fully rooted. We expanded activities under the Africa Collaborative Transit Guarantee Scheme, such that today over $340 million in transit guarantees have been issued. Our insurance subsidiary, Afreximbank, has also issued over $3.2 billion in insurance cover, while our impact fund, FEDA, has now deployed more than half of the about $700 million committed to it by Afreximbank. In November 2023, Afreximbank, in partnership with the African Union Commission and the AFCFTA Secretariat, hosted the third in the biennial Intra-African Trade Fair in Cairo, Egypt. Despite the challenging political economic environment, it attracted over 29,000 visitors, 2,000 exhibitors, and about $43 billion in deals that were signed. We use this occasion to thank the members of the CARICOM that participated in the fair. We look forward to many more CARICOM countries joining the 4th edition of the trade fair that will hold next year in Algeria during September 4 to 10, 2025. Your Excellencies, Honorable Prime Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have laid the foundation on which progress can be made. We must now pool our strengths and resources to pursue investments that will remove the wedge between Africa and the Caribbean. We must create the conditions that will support the expansion of intra-Caribbean air shipping lines and maintain incentives that will enable us begin to fly from Africa to the Caribbean and vice versa, and also ship goods from Africa to the Caribbean. Afreximbank stands ready to work with partners to support these and similar efforts with an array of product offerings. We must now commit to a Bahamas Accord that will ensure the adoption of PAPs for inter-Caribbean payments and Afri-Caribbean payments. An accord that will ensure that we accelerate the implementation of the CARICOM Exim Bank. An accord that will also emphasize the commencement of structured people-to-people exchange between Africa and the Caribbean. We should also begin to consider initiating a free trade agreement negotiation between Africa and the Caribbean. We recognize that this will only make sense if we begin to build strong business links and promote tourism flows between our two regions. Through the forum we are gathered here to attend, we are enabling businesses across our regions to tap into the vast opportunities in our respective geographies.
There are many things we need to do. Learning from the multiple crises we have experienced since COVID-19, it is very clear that Africa and diaspora must work together to own their destiny. The example of COVID-19 and the vaccine, as explained, are very clear. So I see two categories of actions. At the global level, we are experiencing a lot of challenges, and we need to come together to be better coordinated and define and agree on a common position to raise our voice at the global scene and make a clear case about our common interest. We can do it if we work closely as Africans in the context of the global Africa.
Right.
But there's many things we need to do, both in our own countries, domestically, and in our regions, including easing the movement of goods and people. These are just political decisions to make. Yesterday, one of the biggest investors in Africa was saying that he has to apply, he needs 35 visas to visit African countries to explore investment opportunities. It's a paradox. We need investors, and yet we close borders. So these are easy problems to solve. We also need to improve our business environment to facilitate our local investors, but also foreign investors, to create jobs, to transfer technologies, to support the youth. And we need also to accelerate our integration, to accelerate implementation of African Continental Free Trade Area, to connect our countries, with the Caribbean region. The potential is enormous. So there are many things we can do, but in two categories, I think we can do ourselves. Most of them are easy, It requires only political decision, and also there is at the global level where we have to be united and come up with a strong voice to defend our interests.
I think there are two basic things which I just want to mention where global Africa has to do. The first thing is we have to understand our history. I think we are lacking in the understanding of our history, not only us here, but the entire population in the global Africa do not understand our history. That I say because, you know, in 6,000 BC, our civilization, the global civilization, has begun in Africa. And that Egyptian and Northern African civilization was the beginning of all global civilization. And we have our children, ourselves, our grandchildren, do not understand that we were the pioneers of the civilization globally. And the black people, we are not inferior. And I think this is something which can inspire us, our children, our grandchildren, very well, if we can teach them properly. You know, even the Mesopotamian, the northern India, northern China civilization, which has come 2,500 years after the African civilization, and we do not understand that we can bring African Renaissance if we understand our history. The second issue which I just wanted to mention, you know, there are many things we can discuss about history, but you know, we have a history of slavery and a history of colonial administration and colonial political economy. But we have not clearly understood what the political economy of our colonial masters was. And practically, when you see now in our continent, let me say global Africa, we do have a political economy that has continued without a big change from the colonial political economy. And if we don't change that rent-seeking political economy of our colonial masters, we copied and tried to pursue with it, then I think we cannot bring that kind of change. Yes, in this conference, we are all being inspired, and we also see that there is a hope at the end of the tunnel that we can reform, renaissance can come to our continent, Africa, and the entire global Africa. But nonetheless, if we don't clearly put in place, you know, the rent-seeking political economy into productive political economy in our global Africa, we cannot move forward. I think you asked about Deng Xiaoping and about Liu Keqiang and different other Asian countries. We are not inferior. It's not because of our skin of our color. It's not because, you know, we have problems as slave mentality, or because it is, you know, Afro-pessimism. But the whole thing is, yes, Indians are moving very fast than us. Yes, Chinese are moving they are transforming their economy. It's not about the color of their skin. Simply, it's a political economy issue. So we need leaders that can change the entire global, you know, Africa, the political economy of rent-seeking into a political economy of production and competition in the global arena.
I would like to bring to mind two illustrious Caribbeans, Aimé Césaire, first of all, because he described the process by which colonization and slave trade created the conditions for the decline of our continent, for the decline of Africa. At the same time, I call to mind another Caribbean, Frantz Fanon, who said that each generation has its mission, that it may either carry out or betray. Your question prompts me to ask the question, what is the mission of our generation? Our mission is to put an end to the decline that started way back in the 16th century with slave trade and colonization. It turns out that we have a tool, we have a roadmap, and this roadmap is Agenda 2064 of the African Union. This agenda was crafted a decade ago with flagship projects like the African Continental Free Trade Area and the development plan for infrastructure in Africa, or the industrialization plan for Africa, or the agricultural development plan for Africa, CADAP. Now, to implement all these very important projects, there is a condition, a precondition, in my opinion, and this prerequisite is that we should trust ourselves. That is very important. Africa must do away with this dependency syndrome, which gets us to think that the solutions to our problems are abroad, outside the continent. Let me quote an English man who came to Africa in 1835. The quotation is a bit long, and this is what he says. His name was Macaulay, and in February 1835, he spoke before the British Parliament. This is what he said: I traveled across Africa. I did not see a beggar, nor a thief. I saw people with high moral values, and I do believe that we cannot conquer this country unless we break, erase the backbone of that nation, which is its spirituality, its cultural heritage. Therefore, I propose that we replace its educational and cultural system such that Africans will think that what comes from abroad, what hails from abroad, particularly from the UK, is better than what they had been believing. That way, they will lose their self-esteem. They would lose their self-esteem. They will lose their culture. And they will become what we want them to become. That is, a truly a nation that is dominated. We have to get rid of that dependency complex to roll out the AU vision, namely that of Agenda 2064 of the AU. And we are well advanced in the implementation of this vision, because today you've asked the question, what should we do? And we have to continue rolling out the AFCFTA. We have already done a lot to operationalize that AFCFTA with all the protocols, all the MOUs that have been signed. For instance, on the area itself, the MOU on trade in services, on dispute settlement, the MOU on digitalization, on investment, on competition, and you name the rest. There are over 10 MOUs and protocols that have been negotiated and signed, and I wish to commend the intervention of Afreximbank regarding the operationalization of the AFCFTA. Support of Afreximbank was critical in the progress that we have made for the free trade area to materialize. Now, bear with me, please. Perhaps I'm taking too much time, but bear with me. The AFCFTA would be an empty shell if there are no other projects attached to it, because to trade there's a need for production, and so you have to create value chains. There's a need to industrialize the continent, modernize agriculture, have goods that Africans can trade between and among themselves. And so you have to carry out the other flagship projects on the Agenda 2063, industrialization, agriculture, etc., etc. But behind all of this, there is another problem. Behind all this, there is the problem of financing. Financing is critical. Without financing, the projects will never be carried out. Now, you have to look at financing at two levels. First of all, domestically, and then externally. As I said earlier on, we have to rely on ourselves. There's a need for strong democratic institutions in our country able to mobilize taxes. I do believe that currently our countries are very weak with a tax pressure rate hovering around 15, 16%. There's a need to increase this rate to about 25, 30% to mobilize internal or domestic resources to fund our development projects. But there is also, and previous speakers did mention this, there's a need for us to reform the global financial architecture. The current global financial architecture produces poverty, produces inequality. It does not produce development. Debt can be an instrument for development in a global financial architecture that's normal, where there is equitable access to resources. Yet today, what is happening? It turns out that when an African country wants to go on the international financial market, either they are not eligible because the rating agencies have a country risk rating that is too high, so they do not access financing, or they access financing at interest rates that are close to usury rates. Bear with me, please. And so debt is producing underdevelopment and poverty instead of producing development. And this has to be corrected. And that, I believe, is part of the fight that we have to wage to reform the global financial architecture so that it is more equitable. That is very important. And reform the IMF. The quotas of the IMF have to be reformed, because how are they determined today? They are determined with a rule that gives a high weighting focused on the GDP to the tune of 50%, whereas we must struggle for the poverty index to have a higher weighting in the way the quotas are calculated.
Let me put it in this way, and I've listened to all the speakers with very high interest, but also the important message which they were delivering. That today, when we're gathered here, for the first time, the African nations, the Afreximbank in a country of CARICOM, that is a signal. That's a signal that for so many years we haven't managed to cooperate. It's a signal that we were separated. It's a signal that we were divided. So this is the first comment which I want to provide, is that in today's world, the history is there, and that the history had separated and divided us. Today, when we are hearing and listening, we are listening to opportunities, business opportunities, financial opportunities, production opportunities, labor opportunities, connectivity opportunities. That's what we're hearing, that we have missed for many years. And that is what we have to embrace, looking at the future. My country, Suriname, is a country with a small population of 600,000 people. But we have the mineral sector, the gold, the bauxite, the gravel. We do have our country covered with 93% of forests, with low deforestation, one of the 3 countries in the world which is carbon negative country. With biodiversity, with a diversity in the community, all ethnicity, all religion group, all cultural group, and now discovered with huge amount of oil and gas. And our view as government and my view as leader, and that is what I want to offer, is that's what we have in my country. In terms of a fertile land for the agriculture production, in terms of oil and gas, in terms of natural resources, let us have joint investment. Let us have joint production. Let us share this wealth with the region, with the world. Let us create food security in my land for the entire world, starting with our regions. Let us guarantee energy security for the world. That's our view, that we should not keep those resources only for a small group of people, but let us share that wealth which is provided by God in our country, which is meant to deliver it for everyone. And I'm inviting all the business community, business people, you're welcome. Come to Suriname and invest in Suriname, and we are looking for partners, and my country is open. So concrete, to give an answer, I think that these 2 regions should have better cooperation to strengthen the South-South cooperation. These 2 regions have all the potential to develop themselves, and if they have good cooperation, if they will have strategic cooperation, all the countries in the South-South cooperation can become a very strong, developed country.
The evidence shows that the slaves who departed from Western Africa fought for their freedom. Some died on the way. The most rebellious of them were punished by being kept longest on the journey, and they landed in Jamaica. So it's not by accident that we are in the vanguard of fighting for freedom. We did it with some of our great heroes, and later on we did it in song. After Marcus Garvey, there was Bob Marley, there was Peter Tosh, all singing against the need for equal human dignity. I wish, like President Ali, that the presentations this evening were open to a wider audience, and that the press, I better be careful how I say this. If we came here and we were fighting among ourselves, it would be headline news. We have come and we have renewed our pledge to work together as one. That's not news. If anybody was in any doubt as to whether unity within the 6 regions was an option, that was dispelled by the masterly presentations from which we all benefited, and particularly by the president of Afreximbank, who demonstrated what they have been able to achieve to make the sixth region a meaningful reality in 3 short years. And there are some lessons to be drawn from that. First of all, Afreximbank is a truly African bank that spans the entire continent. And we know that within the AU, a lot of time has to be spent in trying to deal with conflicts, most of which arise from the boundaries that were not designed by us, but by our imperial colonizers who disregarded tribal boundaries. I'm not going to try to add too much to what was said, but I would like to make just a few points in terms of particular modes of implementation. And I'm going to start with the business of trade, because that is essential to generate wealth. Nobody can determine but ourselves what trading relationships we develop among ourselves. We know that Africa is a huge continent, in fact, producing virtually everything that mankind will ever need. And the first thing that has to happen is that Africa has to finally exercise true sovereign power over all its resources. Yes. Whether it is primary commodities, as President Addo is trying to do in Ghana with cocoa, for example, whether it is diamonds, what the people in Botswana are trying to do, whether it's uranium, which is being used to make bombs that will kill us 10 times over. First of all, Africa must decide that it is the seller who determines the price. If the buyer can't afford it, do without it. And if you put them to that test, you will be surprised. The wives are not going to do without the diamonds. So they're going to pay, they're willing to pay any price. And the superpowers can't do without the uranium. So they're going to pay the price. The next thing, in terms of our own internal trade, and Professor spoke very meaningfully about your PAP system, is we have to use commodities and some of these resources more like money. The bartering system, rather than the finding of capital from sources such as the World Bank and the IMF, about which my colleague spoke so meaningfully and so feelingly today. To make that happen, and that is why I was so pleased at some of the specifics mentioned by the president of the bank. Transport is essential. We were taken here by European traders. The hurricanes which threaten to destroy us are the winds that drove the sailing boats from the western coast of Africa to the Caribbean. They gathered the slaves until the winds would be propitious. Bulk is necessary to make the economies of scale feasible. So we have to start to build ports in the Caribbean where we accumulate the goods that we are going to be sending to Africa, and likewise in Africa there should be central ports where a sufficiency of goods is collected to make the thing worthwhile. I want to talk about the importance of people, not just in terms of tourism, which is a sector of increasing importance to all of us, but I want to talk about its importance in Africans knowing their cousins across the Caribbean and Caribbean people knowing their ancestors on the continent. It's very, very important for us to develop that sense of knowledge, that sense of confidence, that sense of pride in ourselves. And lastly, just before you cut me off, this is the age of technology.
Yes.
And Africa and the Caribbean must be at the cutting edge of technology.
What matters for us is to come together and have a strong case. And what we see globally, as I said from the beginning, we need to fight for our interest. We have already our financial institutions, like Afreximbank and many other multilateral banks. We need to work together to strengthen their financial capacity by expanding the membership. Some of them, some countries are not member yet. I can see a good development with the Afreximbank by attracting members from the Caribbean countries, 11 out of 15. It's a good progress. We have many other, like insurance in Africa. We have other, like investment banks in Africa. We need to expand their membership. All African countries need to join. Caribbean countries need to join. But by joining, it means also increase in the capitalization. They need us to continue to innovate, create new financial products, increase their capacity to raise more money from international market to finance development project in Africa.
Our main problem is when we talk about illicit financial flow from Africa and our pension funds are investing in elsewhere out of Africa, it's all because we do not have a conducive environment at home. So I think we have to clean our house and also make our political economy correct. This is very important, even to negotiate with international financial architecture. We need to do that, and critical.
I was touching on it in my last mention of cultural exchanges. I would expand that further to say academic studies, student exchange. Our There was a time when we had teachers in Africa, and when we had a volume of teachers of Africa in the Caribbean. Particularly now with the advent of the internet, a lot can be done virtually. So we don't need to be in massive expenditure of travel. We have, of course, to respect time differences to fix the events.
It's very important to design a long-term vision. You need that vision 2060, where we want to go. Expressed by all the leaders, so you need leadership, but also accepted by all the nations. That's the first thing you need to create unity and to create such a future which will be beneficial for the African nation, but also for the Caribbean. You need integration. You need integration in the financial system. Yeah. You need cooperation agreement in creating preferential economic markets to have better opportunities as regions to do business. And finally, you need more people-to-people communication, cooperation to create trust, to create confidence. That's the basic for all the development what we want to achieve.
Global Africa is integrating the 5 regions of the continent, plus the 6th one. And to add my voice to the previous speaker, we must craft a long-term vision. Earlier on, you did make mention of China. How did China address its challenges? Now, with the coming on board of Deng Xiaoping in the 70s, with his slogan, whether the cat is black or white, provided it catches rats, then they had a vision covering centenaries. But for us in Africa, we have Agenda 2063. 40 years from now, what would Africa look like? The Africa that we want would require that we implement Agenda 2063. We have to mobilize ourselves. The 5 or the 6 regions of the continent, we need to mobilize ourselves to implement flagship projects on the Agenda 2063. There's nothing else to be done. We have to rely on ourselves. We have to rely on our strengths. And doing away with this dependency syndrome, as I said earlier on. So we have to mobilize resources within Africa to finance Agenda 2063, to finance infrastructure, to finance industry, to roll back poverty.
It's about people. Yeah. And our collaboration, our cooperation, standing together. We have adversaries to fight together. Yes. And the bigger you are, the best you can compete in the global market.
The concept of global Africa is timely. It's about getting our own share, and the right share, in the global economy. And we can, with the population we represent, the resources we represent, the voice we represent, we can get the commensurate share in the global economy, in the global affairs.